How did fiscal policy play a role in the bond market? So who's fiscal policy again? Are we talking Janet Yellen or President Obama? President Obama. So how does fiscal policy play a role in the bond market? What's going on there that there might be an impact, a governmental impact through fiscal policy in the bond market?
Say we go to war.
Okay, say we go to war, and what happens in regard to bonds?
They issue more bonds.
Okay, so new issues of bonds come in, which might have durations of how long? 5 years is a possibility. How else? What other lengths? 10 years? What other lengths?
3 months.
3 months. I just wanted to bring up that they could be very short term in duration versus very long term or longer term in duration. They can be all across the board depending on what they're trying to do, and that's important to keep in mind. What is our kind of breaking point roughly that we use in the book for kind of long-term securities versus short-term securities? A year, yeah. A year's kind of our pivot point. And it's kind of just a fuzzy point, but roughly that's when we think about money market type stuff or short-term securities, is it less than a year, a maturity less than a year, and longer term we get into the 10-year, 5-year, whatever. So the fiscal policy, when they issue stuff, can take the role of multiple durations. In fact, that's what they do. They kind of spread it out depending on what their objectives are. How does monetary policy play a role in the bond market? Again, I don't think I really specifically brought that up, but how does monetary policy play a role? Do they issue bonds? Does the Federal Reserve issue bonds? They don't borrow money. That's right. They don't effectively say, hey, I want to raise some money for running my monetary policy thing, right? Except in maybe some conspiracy theories. They're tucking away money somewhere and doing something deceptive. Do they hold bonds? Yes. So they do hold bonds, and in fact, they buy the bonds that Obama issued. So they can be a purchaser of those instruments. In fact, that's typically the largest inventory of government bonds is held by the Federal Reserve. Again, that's a tool we're going to learn more about later, but you did see that in macro class. And I think it's important now to start to think of who the players are over here. So the Federal Reserve can influence the price of bonds in different maturity levels, long-term and short-term. Historically, they stuck with short-term. This whole latest regime that was uncharted territory for the Federal Reserve, they started monkeying around with long-term. It was called Operation Twist. So they started buying longer-term maturities to try to alter longer-term interest rates. So they can kind of put their fingers in, and they have discretion. We talked about the independence of the Fed. They've got their discretion to do that type of stuff too. All right, then who else was the players over here? So we got the government, both levels of government potentially impacting through fiscal and monetary policy in the bond market. Who else was over here in the bond market? Either supplying or demanding, whatever. I just want to think of the participants. Consumers, okay, or households in general. So households that are building wealth for retirement can hold these bonds, okay? And then who's our other participant? I think we've got businesses, corporations, right, issuing loans. And so all of these players are in different places in the market. Now this side over here, we have those same businesses making decisions about whether they should hold some form of their wealth in the form of bonds or some in the form of money. Same thing with households. So we started to think about these two things on the circumstances. When interest rates are low, people tend to want to hold more money because it's not worth it to put it in a bond. Well, if I'm only getting 1%, why would I go buy a bond? I might as well hold cash. You know, it doesn't really pay off. As interest rates start to rise, then people will hold less money and buy more bonds. Okay, questions on that little summary? We talked about the shifters, the impacts. Okay, so let's dig into a bank. Let's see, I think I'm going to have to start